"Excuse me, sir. This entrance is for priority passengers only," said the gate agent, her voice flat and firm, her badge flashing under the fluorescent airport lights. Sergeant Marcus Reed adjusted the strap of his military backpack and shifted. His weight, the polished edge of his service boot scraping softly against the airport floor. He gave a polite nod, standing tall in his desert camouflage uniform. "I'm boarding first class, ma'am," he said evenly, lifting his ticket toward her. The agent, Karen Whitmore, mid-40s, blonde bob, pressed navy blazer, didn't even glance at it. Instead, she looked Marcus up and down like she was trying to find an excuse carved into his skin. "Sir, I think you're confused," she said, a touch louder, as a few nearby passengers began to glance over. "This area is for first class and military command." Her smile was tight and unmoving. Marcus kept his voice low and calm, though a flush of heat prickled at the back of his neck. "I'm aware," he said simply, extending the boarding pass again. Karen folded her arms. "If you don't move to general boarding, I'll have to call security," she said. Behind him, a businessman in a gray suit coughed impatiently. A woman tugged her child closer, her eyes flickering between Marcus and the gate agent. Someone pulled out a phone, recording maybe. The hum of the airport, the baggage wheels, the faraway flight announcements, seemed to dull, replaced by a cold silence around them. Marcus inhaled slowly through his nose. "Stay calm. You're wearing the flag. You're better than this." He tucked the ticket back into his chest pocket and took a step back without a word. The humiliation felt heavier than his rucksack. "That's what I thought," Karen muttered, barely under her breath. He heard it. And so did everyone else standing nearby. The line moved forward. People passed Karen without trouble. Smiles, nods, a few light jokes about carry-ons and turbulence. Marcus stood off to the side, silent, invisible, or maybe worse, hyper-visible in the wrong way. A soft voice touched his shoulder. "Excuse me, sir, I saw everything." Marcus turned. It was a woman in a dark blue business suit, her ID badge clipped to her belt. "Government issued. Name's Angela Brooks, Department of Defense," she said, offering a quiet, firm handshake. Her brown eyes, serious but kind, met his. "Please wait here, I'll be right back." She walked off, her heels clicking fast across the tile. Marcus exhaled, watching her disappear into a side office marked personnel only. His fists stayed tight at his sides. Minutes stretched. People continued boarding. Karen kept her smile tight, ignoring him. Finally, Angela returned, with two uniformed men behind her. One wore the unmistakable silver eagle of a colonel. The colonel walked straight up to Karen. "Is there a problem here?" he said. Karen blinked, suddenly smaller, the air around her tightening. "No, sir. Just following protocol," she said, her voice high and thin now. Angela stepped forward smoothly. "This passenger is Sergeant Marcus Reed," she said, her voice cool and sharp. "Decorated war veteran. Orders straight from the Pentagon to travel on this flight first class. Immediate priority." The colonel turned his gaze on Karen, his jaw tightening. "Show me your supervisor," he said. Karen stumbled back, fumbling with her radio. Marcus stood motionless, face unreadable. Inside, the shame simmered into something colder, something patient. The airline's manager came hustling over, his tie askew. "Is there an issue?" he panted. The colonel didn't blink. "This airline has a government contract," he said, voice low but full of iron. "And it seems your staff isn't trained to recognize their own nation's heroes." The manager's face paled. He looked at Marcus, really looked for the first time, seeing the soldier, not just the color of his skin. "Sir, I apologize for any misunderstanding," he stammered. Angela held up a hand. "It's noted, and it's being reported directly to the Pentagon's Civilian Affairs Office," she said. The colonel nodded grimly. "Expect a review. Effective immediately." Marcus kept his eyes forward, breathing steady. Karen stood frozen, eyes wide as the full weight of her mistake sank in. Around them, the crowd had gone silent, recording, whispering. The colonel turned back to Marcus, his voice softer. "You." "Board first, Sergeant Reed," Marcus nodded once, feeling every pair of eyes on him, burning like spotlights. As he passed Karen, he didn't speak. He didn't need to. Silence, clean, cutting silence, was the loudest thing in that airport. Terminal. He scanned his boarding pass at the gate. The scanner beeped approvingly. The glass doors slid open. Marcus walked down the jet bridge alone, each step deliberate, each breath shedding the weight of that moment behind him. But deep down, he knew. This wasn't over. Not yet. The real response would come at a level Karen couldn't even imagine. "You sure you want to sit here?" asked the flight attendant, a skinny man with a rehearsed smile, glancing at Marcus's uniform like it was a mistake. Marcus just nodded. "I'm good, thanks." The attendant hesitated for a breath, then shrugged and moved down the aisle, asking others if they needed anything before takeoff. Marcus slid into his wide first-class seat, set his backpack carefully by his feet, and stared out the small oval window. The engines rumbled low beneath him, a distant, hungry growl. Across the aisle, a middle-aged white couple exchanged whispers. Marcus caught the words, military, and surprising, from under their breath. He turned his face back to the window, jaw tight. The cabin filled with the low murmur of boarding announcements, overhead bins slamming shut, the clatter of bags and plastic cups. The seatbelt sign chimed overhead. A small child somewhere behind him began crying. Marcus sat still, his hands folded carefully in his lap, the rows of stitched ribbons and medals on his chest heavy with a lifetime of service. And suddenly, painfully invisible, the plane lifted from the ground, pressing them all back into their seats. The lights dimmed. The city fell away. He exhaled. It should have been over. But 2 rows ahead, Angela Brooks wasn't finished. Sitting upright, her laptop open on the tray table, she typed fast, her badge clipped clearly to her belt, where anyone could see it. Emails. Names. Incident reports. Each click of the keyboard was a thread pulling tight around the neck of the airline. Across Washington, D.C., inside a Pentagon conference room, a phone buzzed sharply on a polished oak table. A man in a dark gray suit, Assistant Secretary Daniel Hayes, picked it up without looking. "Yeah?" The voice on the other end was brisk. "Sir, it's about the defense transportation contract. We may have a situation." Daniel leaned forward, frowning. "Talk." The staffer cleared his throat. An airline agent at Logan International denied entry to a uniformed soldier booked first class, in violation of standing government orders. Daniel sat back slowly, running a hand over his close-cropped hair. "Name?" he asked. "Sergeant Marcus Reed, sir. Combat veteran. 2 tours." There was a beat of silence, heavy and loaded. Daniel's mind raced. Contracts, procurement deals, public relations, veterans affairs. It was bad. It was very bad. And then the staffer added quietly, "Sir, the incident was filmed. It's already starting to spread online." Daniel cursed under his breath. He stood up, jacket stretching tight over his shoulders, and strode toward the window, staring down at the glittering maze of DC lights. He didn't have a choice. The airline's $180 million contract was now hanging by a thread. Back on the plane, Marcus closed his eyes, letting the engine's deep hum fill the hollow spaces inside him. The flight was half over when Angela moved across the aisle, standing quietly beside his seat. She waited until he opened his eyes. "Sir," she said, voice low, "I thought you should know. There's a call happening at the Pentagon, right now, about what happened back there." Marcus blinked. Angela gave a small smile. "People are paying attention." He nodded slowly. He wasn't sure what he was supposed to feel. Satisfaction? Anger? Relief? Mostly he just felt tired. Tired of having to prove something he'd already bled for. Angela leaned closer. "When we land, there's going to be a lot of cameras, news outlets. I can stand with you if you want." Marcus shook his head. "Thank you," he said quietly. "But I'll handle it." Angela respected that. She returned to her seat without another word. Outside, the window, the stars blurred against the curve of the earth. The city lights grew larger, closer. The flight began its descent. The seatbelt sign blinked on. The plane shuddered gently as it tilted down toward the runway, wheels lowering with a soft mechanical whine. Marcus sat back, feeling gravity pull him forward, the weight of everything, service, sacrifice, humiliation, threading through his bones. When the wheels hit the ground, there was a sharp jolt, a punctuation mark on a story that wasn't over yet. The plane taxied to the gate, the doors opened, passengers stood, impatient, gathering their things, whispering. Marcus rose slowly, adjusting his cap under his arm. As he stepped into the jet bridge, a wall of flashing cameras met him. "Sergeant! Sergeant Reed! Over here! Is it true they denied you boarding because of your uniform? Do you feel disrespected by the airline?" The questions flew at him like gravel kicked up by a fast car. He kept walking, steady and silent. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Angela keeping her distance. There, but letting him stand alone. Security tried to guide him through the crowd, but reporters surged forward, phones recording, microphones thrust out. Marcus paused, standing under the harsh blue-white glare of the terminal lights. He adjusted the cap in his hands. Then he lifted, his eyes to the cameras, and for the first time that day, he spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "I serve this country so everyone can move freely, not just the ones who fit a certain look." A murmur ran through the crowd, a ripple, sharp and electric. Marcus nodded once, tucked his cap under his arm, and walked forward into the bright storm of attention. Behind him, at a conference room inside the Pentagon, Daniel Hayes was already drafting the first lines of a contract termination letter. The first sentence was short, effective immediately. "We have to get ahead of this," said Brian Calloway, CEO of Liberty Wings Airlines, his voice tight and panicked as he paced the glass-walled conference room. The room overlooked the Washington skyline, but no one was admiring the view. Executives sat around the long oak table, faces pale under the harsh fluorescent lights. Phones buzzed nonstop. Laptops blinked with open news tabs. Black soldier denied boarding by airline staff. Video goes viral. Outrage spreads across social media. Pentagon launches immediate review. Brian slammed his palm against the table, rattling the glasses of water. "How the hell did we let this happen?" he barked. No one answered. No one dared. At the end of the table, their legal counsel, Margaret Dean, adjusted her glasses and cleared her throat. "Sir," she said carefully, "the Pentagon has already issued a preliminary suspension of our military transport contract. They're calling it a breach of dignity protocol." Brian froze. "Suspension?" he repeated. Margaret nodded grimly. "Effective. Immediately. They're pulling all scheduled service, grounding future bookings. This is about to cost us hundreds of millions, and that's before the public fallout hits." Brian turned to the VP of Public Relations, a young woman named Vanessa Green who looked seconds away from tears. "Where's our statement?" he demanded. Vanessa swallowed hard. "We drafted an apology. We're ready to post it on all platforms, Twitter, LinkedIn, our official site." "Is it enough?" Brian snapped. Vanessa hesitated. "Honestly, no," she said, her voice small. "People don't want words anymore. They want action. They want accountability." Brian slammed his hand again. "Fire the gate agent," he said. "Immediately, publicly. Make it loud." Margaret shook her head. "Sir, firing her might not be enough. It could even backfire if it looks like we're scapegoating a low-level employee without taking real responsibility." The room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. Brian ran a hand down his face. Outside the conference room, more emails flooded in. Government officials, veteran groups, news agencies, advocacy organizations. The temperature inside the building seemed to drop by degrees. The vultures were circling. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus Reed sat in a quiet coffee shop, a plain black mug of coffee cooling in front of him. He wore jeans, a simple jacket, baseball cap pulled low, no uniform today, no armor, just a man trying to breathe. The shop was small, tucked between a florist and a bookstore, dimly lit with warm yellow bulbs. Jazz music played softly in the background. At the counter, the barista, a college kid with tattoos and a nose ring, smiled when Marcus walked in. No stares, no whispers. Just a nod, like he was anybody else. It was a rare mercy. Marcus scrolled his phone absently, seeing the headlines multiply. His name. His face, again and again. He wasn't built for this. He wasn't chasing it. All he had ever wanted was to do his job, serve his country, and go home. A quiet dignity. Now they had thrown him into a storm he never asked for. The bell over the door jingled. Angela Brooks stepped inside, shaking the drizzle from her coat. She spotted him immediately and made her way over, sliding into the seat across from him. Marcus offered a small smile. "You found me," Angela shrugged. "Government has its ways." He chuckled under his breath. She slid a folder across the table to him. "I thought you should know," she said. He opened it. Inside, documents, emails, printed screenshots, proof that Liberty Wings Airlines was being investigated, proof that their Pentagon contract was collapsing, proof that multiple senators were already calling for hearings. Angela leaned in. "This is bigger than just you now, Marcus," she said. "It's about every soldier who's ever been overlooked, every veteran who's been forgotten, every kid who put on a uniform and got treated like they didn't matter." Marcus closed the folder slowly. He looked up at her, his voice low. "I never wanted to be a symbol," Angela smiled, soft but firm. "You didn't choose to be," she said, "but you sure as hell are one now." At Liberty Wings headquarters, Brian Calloway stood before a podium, sweating under the hot lights. A hastily arranged press conference. Dozens of reporters sat packed into rows, cameras aimed like weapons. Brian adjusted the microphone, cleared his throat. "We at Liberty Wings deeply regret the incident involving Sergeant Marcus Reed," he said stiffly. "We have terminated the employee responsible. We are reviewing our training procedures. We offer our sincerest apologies to the military community." Flashbulbs popped, hands shot up. "Is the airline CEO offering to resign?" someone shouted. "How will you repair the damage to veteran relationships?" another asked. Brian's face tightened. "We are committed to learning from this experience," he said. It sounded hollow even to him. Somewhere near the back of the room, an activist held up a sign. "Respect those who serve." Brian's hands curled into fists behind the podium. The press conference ended in chaos, shouting, flashing lights, reporters swarming. Behind closed doors, Liberty Wings stock began to plummet. Investors panicked. Board members whispered about emergency meetings. And back in the coffee shop, Marcus sat quietly, watching the news unfold on the muted TV behind the counter. He sipped his cold coffee. No smile, no satisfaction, just a quiet, steady dignity. He wasn't celebrating, he was surviving, because dignity didn't shout. It endured. "Mr. Reed, can you give us a few words?" a young reporter asked, jogging alongside Marcus as he left the coffee shop. Marcus pulled his jacket tighter, against the cold spring air. The streetlights buzzed overhead, casting long shadows on the cracked sidewalk. He didn't break stride. "No comment," he said, voice even. Another reporter, older, grayer, caught up, walking backward in front of him with a microphone. "Sergeant, are you planning legal action? Will you sue Liberty Wings?" Marcus stopped at the curb, waiting for the walk signal. His reflection wavered in the puddles at his feet. He glanced at the reporter. "I'm not thinking about lawsuits," he said calmly. "I'm thinking about respect." The reporter scribbled furiously as the light changed. Marcus crossed the street, letting the city swallow him up. The reporters didn't follow. He wasn't the story they wanted, not flashy, not angry enough. He was something harder to sell. Quiet, strength, real dignity. Across town, Angela Brooks sat in a high-backed chair inside a crowded Pentagon meeting room, tapping her pen against a thick binder labeled Crisis Response. Around her, officials muttered in low tones, faces grim. Assistant Secretary Daniel Hayes entered, his expression carved from stone. He dropped a heavy folder on the table. "It's official," he said. Liberty Wings is blacklisted from all Department of Defense contracts. A low ripple of reaction moved around the table, relief mixed with a tense kind of satisfaction. Angela leaned forward. "What about public acknowledgement?" she asked. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Working on it. Pentagon Communications wants to handle it carefully. Don't want to look like we're taking sides politically." Angela's voice was quiet but firm. "This isn't politics. This is basic human decency." Daniel nodded slowly, the weight of it all settling on his shoulders. "We'll craft a statement," he said. "Make it clear. We stand with Sergeant Reed and all service members like him." Angela sat back, letting the decision settle. She thought about Marcus, the way he stood silent while others raged, the way he carried invisible burdens heavier than any news cycle. They owed him that much, at the very least. Meanwhile, back at Liberty Wings headquarters, Brian Calloway slammed the door to his office hard enough to rattle the glass. Vanessa Green flinched from where she sat near the window, her laptop open to a horrifying graph. Their stock price crashing like a stone. "I need options," Brian barked, pacing like a caged animal. "Now." Vanessa spoke carefully, each word like stepping through a minefield. "We could announce a donation. Maybe a veterans charity. Millions. Big gesture." Brian stopped pacing. He considered it. "Money talks," he muttered. "Might buy us some breathing room." Vanessa hesitated. "Sir, it can't just be money. People are furious. They're calling for boycotts. Travel groups are canceling bookings. Military families are pulling contracts. We're hemorrhaging goodwill." Brian's face flushed red. "So what do you want me to do, Vanessa? Get down on my damn knees on national television?" She said nothing. Because deep down, they both knew no amount of money could buy back respect once it was gone. Especially not from people who understood sacrifice better than anyone. Especially not from people like Marcus Reed. That night, Marcus sat on his small apartment balcony, watching the city lights blink against the dark velvet sky. He didn't turn on the TV. He didn't scroll the news. He just sat, elbows on knees, breathing in the cool, damp air. His phone buzzed on, the small table beside him. A text from Angela. "Pentagon is releasing a statement tomorrow. Thought you should know. Stay strong." Marcus set the phone down without replying. He leaned back, letting the silence wrap around him. It wasn't over yet. He could feel it. The anger, the noise, the chaos still building in the distance. But he wasn't afraid of it. He'd die. Had survived worse. He had survived battlefields where no cameras came, where no one gave out apologies. This was just another fight. Different weapons, same armor. He closed his eyes and let the quiet fill him. The next morning, the world woke, up to headlines screaming across every major news outlet. Pentagon terminates airline contract after soldiers' mistreatment. Veterans demand accountability, respect those who serve. National movement grows. Marcus's face was everywhere again. The boarding gate photo, the viral video still, the shot of him standing tall against the reporters' flashing cameras. The world had seen, and for once, it wasn't looking away. At Liberty Wings, Brian Calloway stared hollow-eyed at the screen in the executive boardroom. One of the shareholders, a sharp-eyed woman named Lila Watson, stood up in the middle of the meeting. "Enough is enough," she said crisply. "Brian, we're calling for a vote of no confidence." Brian's mouth fell open. "You can't." "We can," she said. "And we will. Effective immediately." The boardroom buzzed with agreement. Brian slumped into his chair as the walls of his empire crumbled around him. It wasn't just about bad PR anymore. It was about who they had chosen to be, and who they had been caught being. Back at the Pentagon, Angela Brooks stood at the back of a crowded press briefing. Daniel Hayes took the podium. He looked out over the sea of reporters, adjusted the microphone, and spoke. "Sergeant Marcus Reed's service represents the very best of this nation. The ICL, Department of Defense, stands firmly with him. and with every service member who has earned not just our contracts, but our unshakable respect." Flashbulbs exploded, questions flew, but the message was already clear, and it rang across the country like a silent anthem. Respect, dignity, accountability. It wasn't just Marcus's fight anymore. It was everyone's. "You should sue them, man," said Darnell, Marcus's old friend from high school, leaning back in the diner booth, arms crossed. The smell of bacon and burnt coffee clung to the air. Vinyl seats squeaked as customers shifted. Plates clattered from the kitchen window. Marcus stirred his coffee slowly, watching the cream swirl like smoke. "That's not what this is about," he said. Darnell scoffed, slapping the table lightly. "Come on, bro. They embarrassed you. They tried to act like you didn't belong. You earned that seat. You earned everything they tried to deny you." Marcus looked up, eyes steady. "And now everybody sees it." Darnell shook his head, muttering something under his breath about pride and missed opportunities. But Marcus wasn't moved. He wasn't chasing money. He wasn't chasing headlines. He wasn't chasing anything. He just wanted the truth to stay louder than the lies. He just wanted the next soldier, the next young kid in uniform, to walk through an airport gate without having to prove his worth to a stranger with a clipboard. The bell over the diner door jingled. Another newscast played on the dusty TV mounted in the corner. Marcus barely listened. He had bigger things to think about. At Liberty Wing's headquarters, the walls kept closing in. Brian Calloway sat alone in his office, the blinds drawn, the light from his computer screen casting deep lines across his face. An official letter sat open on his desk, stamped with the Department of Defense seal. Notice of contract termination. The language was cold, surgical. Liberty Wings was finished in government transport, that pipeline of steady, patriotic revenue. Gone. Brian picked up the letter, crumpled it once, then thought better of it. He smoothed it back out. He was going to need it when the board officially voted him out. He glanced at the phone. No calls, no messages, no saving grace. Across the office, the framed photo of the airline's first plane, the one he had once been so proud of, stared back at him like a ghost. Brian closed his eyes. He could almost hear the chant now, growing louder by the day. Respect those who serve. Respect those who serve. And it wasn't going away. Meanwhile, Marcus walked alone through Lincoln Park, the spring air sharp with the smell of wet grass and blooming dogwoods. Joggers passed him, parents pushed strollers. Life moved on. He found a bench under a spreading oak tree and sat down, letting the cool air wash over him. He wasn't sure what he was supposed to feel now. Victory? Closure? Instead, he just felt hollow. Like all the shouting and headlines had blown through him, leaving only silence behind. A young boy in a red hoodie kicked a soccer ball nearby. His father, a tall man in a worn army jacket, clapped and cheered him on. Marcus watched them for a long time, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. This was the real thing. Not press conferences, not contracts, not corporate apologies. Real respect, real pride, quiet, unspoken, lived every day. Angela's voice echoed in his memory. You didn't choose to be a symbol. Maybe not, but maybe he could choose what kind of symbol he became. Not anger, not revenge, something better, something lasting. Later, that evening, Angela called. "Marcus," she said, breathless, "I just got off a call. You're invited to a ceremony at the Pentagon, a public acknowledgement. They want to honor you. Big time." Marcus leaned against his kitchen counter, staring at the blank wall. "Honor me?" he repeated. Angela chuckled softly. "Yeah, for your service, but also for your restraint, for reminding people what real dignity looks like." There was a long pause. Marcus closed his eyes. He wasn't sure he wanted a stage. He didn't like the bright lights, the microphones. But maybe if he stood there, it wouldn't just be for him. It would be for every kid who grew up thinking they'd never be enough. For every soldier who walked quietly through airports and schools and offices, carrying the weight of invisible battles no one saw. Maybe it wasn't about pride. Maybe it was about legacy. He exhaled slowly. "All right," he said. "I'll be there." 2 days later, the Pentagon auditorium filled with polished shoes, crisp uniforms, and the low hum of quiet conversation. The American flag stood tall behind the podium. Marcus stood backstage, adjusting his tie nervously. His dress uniform felt heavier today, the medals gleaming under the lights. Angela appeared beside him, offering a small, encouraging smile. "You ready?" she whispered. Marcus gave a slow nod. The MC, a grizzled veteran named Colonel Stokes, tapped the microphone. The room fell silent. "Today we recognize not just a soldier's service," Stokes said, voice deep and sure, "but his unshakable dignity in the face of injustice. Sergeant Marcus Reed reminds us all, respect is not given by status. It's earned by sacrifice and demanded by decency." Applause erupted heavy and real. Marcus stepped forward. The lights felt hot. The podium felt far away, but he walked steadily. Each step was his own. "Take your time, Sergeant," Colonel Stokes said quietly as Marcus reached the podium, his voice carrying just enough warmth to break the heavy silence. Marcus gripped the sides of the podium for a breath. Hundreds of faces watched him. Generals, soldiers, families, reporters. American flags lined the walls. The lights above blurred slightly as he blinked, steadying himself. He didn't have a written speech. He didn't need one. He spoke plainly, the way he always had. "My name is Marcus Reed," he began, his voice low but strong. "I'm a soldier. I'm a son. I'm a neighbor. I'm a citizen. I'm nothing more special than anyone who's worn this uniform before me." He paused, breathing through the lump forming in his throat. "But too often," he said, looking across the crowd, "people look at the uniform and forget to see the person inside it. And sometimes they don't even look at all." A soft shifting ran through the audience, the sound of hearts leaning closer. Marcus continued, "What happened to me at that airport? It wasn't just about me. It was about something bigger. It's about every person who's ever been told in 1,000 quiet ways, 'You don't belong here.'" He let the words settle. He could see Angela standing along the wall, her arms folded, nodding slightly. "I'm not here to shame anyone," Marcus said, his voice steady. "I'm not here for revenge." He lifted his chin. "I'm here to say, enough. Enough forgetting. Enough overlooking. Enough pretending that respect is optional." The room was so still, you could hear the faint crackle of the speakers. Respect isn't a reward you hand out when it's convenient. It's the bare minimum. It's the first thing. It's the only thing. Someone near the front, a young female soldier, wiped her eyes quickly with her sleeve. Marcus finished simply, "This isn't just my fight. It's ours. And we're not invisible anymore." He stepped back. Applause broke like a tidal wave, loud and rolling, filling the room with heat, with energy, with something bigger than gratitude, something closer to healing. Marcus stood quietly, letting it wash over him, not soaking in praise, just standing in it. Part of it, finally seen, finally heard. Outside the Pentagon, news vans lined the sidewalk. Marcus slipped out a side door with Angela at his side, avoiding the worst of the flashing cameras. The afternoon sun was sharp, the sky painfully blue. Angela handed him a plain manila envelope. "What's this?" he asked. She smiled. "Something you earned." Inside, an official letter, signed and sealed. Marcus unfolded it carefully. It was a formal commendation, but not just that. A personal note was attached from the Secretary of Defense. "Your dignity made this nation stronger. You reminded us who we are. You reminded us who we must always be. Thank you, Sergeant Reed. The future salutes you." Marcus stood there for a long moment, the envelope heavy in his hand. Angela watched him, her arms crossed, a small, knowing smile on her face. "It doesn't fix everything," she said, "but it's a start." Marcus nodded slowly. It's more than I expected, he admitted. Angela's eyes softened. It's what you deserved. They stood there for a while, two soldiers in a city full of noise, letting the sun warm their faces. Across town, at Liberty Wings Airlines, moving trucks lined the curb. Brian Calloway's office was stripped bare. No awards, no framed photos, no echo of the empire he once ruled. He stood behind a folding table now, signing final exit documents under the hard eyes of the board. Lila Watson, sharp, relentless, slid the last paper toward him. You built something once, she said, not unkindly. Then you forgot who you were building it for. Brian didn't answer. He didn't have to. The emptiness said it all. He signed the paper, set the pen down, and walked out of his own company for the last time. The doors clicked shut behind him, final, merciless. Outside, protesters still circled the building, chanting loud and steady, "Respect those who serve. Respect those who serve." The words chased him down the sidewalk. Meanwhile, Marcus drove home alone through D.C.'s narrow streets, windows down, the breeze tugging gently at his jacket. He didn't turn on the radio. He didn't need noise. Tucked, streets were alive around him, people hurrying home, food carts steaming on corners, kids laughing as they raced their bikes. Life, messy and beautiful, rolled on, and for the first time in a long while, Marcus didn't feel like he was fighting to stay part of it. He felt anchored, visible, alive. He turned onto his street, parking in front of his small apartment. As he climbed out, an older neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, waved from across the way. "Saw you on the news, son," he called. "Made us proud." Marcus lifted a hand in thanks, smiling genuinely. No cameras here, no microphones, just real respect spoken from one American to another, and somehow, that simple moment meant more than any press conference ever could. Later that night, sitting alone at his kitchen table, Marcus picked up a small notebook he hadn't touched in months. On the first page, he scribbled 2 words, almost without thinking. Keep building. Not because everything was fixed, not because the fight was over, but because now, finally, it felt like it was worth fighting for. Not for revenge, not for headlines, for dignity, for the kids watching, for the ones who would come after, for all of them, for all of us. "You changed something, Sergeant," Angela said, sliding into the booth across from Marcus at the little diner near his apartment. The place was half empty, the smell of frying bacon hanging heavy in the air. A battered jukebox played some old country song nobody was really listening to. Marcus stirred his coffee slowly, his hand steady. "Feels like the world just moved on," he said, his voice low. Angela shook her head. "No," she said firmly. "You moved it." She pulled a slim binder from her satchel and laid it between them. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Angela flipped it open. Inside, printed news articles, screenshots, photos. Veterans organizing boycotts against companies with shady records. Airlines, rewriting their staff training protocols. A new bipartisan bill proposed, the Service Member Dignity Act, gaining traction fast in Congress. "Because of you," Angela said quietly, tapping the binder. Marcus sat back, stunned. He had thought it was just noise, headlines that would vanish by morning. But this was real. Real change. At Liberty Wings, the aftermath was a slow, painful bleed. Passengers canceled bookings. Veteran organizations blacklisted them. Travel blogs warned travelers to book elsewhere. Brian Calloway's replacement, a tight-jawed executive named Matthew Green, stood before a much smaller press pool, trying to patch the sinking ship. "We are implementing sweeping changes to ensure no service member or veteran is ever disrespected again," Matthew said, reading stiffly from a teleprompter. But it was too late. The brand was stained, the trust was broken, and the American people, weary of empty words, had decided to look elsewhere. Meanwhile, Marcus's phone buzzed. A new email, from an address he didn't recognize. He opened it carefully. It was from the mother of a young black soldier, Private Jordan Ellis, stationed Overseas. The message was short but powerful. My son told me he saw your story. He said it made him feel like he mattered again. Thank you, Sergeant Reed, for standing tall so the rest of them could breathe easier. Marcus sat back, his throat tight. It wasn't the crowds that mattered. It wasn't the cameras. It was kids like Jordan. It was mothers like hers. It was the next generation stepping forward with their heads a little higher, their backs a little straighter, and it was worth every second of humiliation to get here. Later that week, Marcus stood outside a small community center in Southeast D.C., watching kids play basketball on a cracked blacktop. Angela met him there holding a clipboard. "They're naming the scholarship after you," she said, smiling. Marcus blinked. Scholarship? Angela nodded. Funded by donations pouring in, for veterans and military kids. First one's going to a local high school senior next month. Marcus stared at the buzzing court, teenagers laughing, shoving, shouting over missed shots, and felt something deep shift inside him. He wasn't just a symbol on a screen anymore. He was a seed, something planted, something growing. "What's it called?" he asked, voice rough. Angela smiled wider. "The Marcus Reed Resilience Scholarship." Marcus laughed once under his breath, shaking his head. "Resilience, huh?" Angela nudged his arm lightly. "Yeah. Because you didn't break." He didn't have a response to that, just a quiet nod. A small, honest smile. Elsewhere, at the Pentagon, Daniel Hayes stood in front of a task force meeting. Behind him, projected on a large screen, were the words, "Military Service Member Rights Initiative." A ripple of excitement ran through the room. New policies, new protections, new accountability standards for private contractors, all born from a single quiet act of dignity in a crowded airport terminal. Daniel clicked to the next slide. Angela. Brooks's name was listed in bold under lead advisor, and below that, special honorary contributor, Sergeant Marcus Reed. Small gesture, but a permanent one. Written into the foundation of something that would outlive the news cycle. Outlive them all. Back in Marcus's neighborhood, something simple and beautiful happened. One morning, walking down to the corner store, Marcus noticed a new mural being painted across the brick wall of an old abandoned building. A group of local artists, teens mostly, crowded around it, spraying color into the early sunlight. Bright reds, bold blues, deep, unshakable golds. At the center of the mural stood the figure of a black soldier, standing tall, backpack slung over one shoulder, head held high. No name was written under it. None needed. Everyone knew who it was. Marcus stood there a long time, heart pounding slow and deep against his ribs. One of the teenagers, a girl with purple-streaked braids, noticed him watching. She gave a little nod and called out, "We see you, sir!" Marcus lifted a hand in silent thanks. He didn't have words big enough for what he felt. Gratitude, pride, hope. All wrapped together, stitched into something he hadn't felt in a long time. Belonging. That night, sitting at his kitchen table, Marcus opened his old notebook again. Under "keep building," he added 3 more words, "for the next." He smiled, closed the notebook, and slept better than he had in years. "Marcus, you got another letter?" said Mrs. Alvarez, the building manager, handing over a thick white envelope as Marcus came through the lobby. Marcus thanked her with a smile, and tucked the letter under his arm as he climbed the stairs to his apartment. Outside, the city buzzed with a soft, easy hum. Kids shouting in the distance, a car radio thumping, the smell of someone grilling steaks a few buildings away. Normal life. Unshaken. Unbothered. He liked that. Inside his apartment, he dropped his keys onto the small table by the door, shrugged off his jacket, and sat down at the kitchen table. The envelope was heavy. He tore it open carefully. Inside, a formal letterhead stamped with gold. The White House. Marcus stared at it for a second, blinking. He unfolded the paper. "Dear Sergeant Reed, your actions have sparked a conversation our country needed to have." Your strength, grace, and dignity have reminded America what honor truly looks like. We would be honored to welcome you to the White House for a private recognition ceremony, celebrating the values you upheld so fiercely. With deepest respect and gratitude, President of the United States, Marcus set the letter down slowly. The words blurred a little as he stared at them. He wasn't the kind of man who dreamed of handshakes and ceremonies. He didn't need plaques or parades. But maybe standing. There could mean something for the ones who were still invisible, for the quiet soldiers no one ever cheered for. He tapped the envelope lightly against the table, thinking, "Not for me," he murmured. "For them." Meanwhile, across America, something had shifted. Small moments. Quiet revolutions. An airline in Texas unveiled a new boarding policy. All active service members would be personally escorted to their seats. A school district in Georgia added a new history unit, modern veterans' experiences, not just wars, but coming home. A college in Chicago launched a new scholarship, the Resilient Warriors Fund, built for first-generation military students. Little changes. Real ones. Rooted. Not in fear, but in respect, because once people had seen Marcus Reed stand alone against a tide of casual cruelty, they couldn't unsee it. They had to choose, and more, they were choosing right. At Liberty Wings, the empty hallways echoed. Offices sat gutted. Flight bookings dwindled. Partnerships dissolved. No public apology could undo the fracture they had caused. They weren't just rebuilding a brand now. They were starting from the ashes. At a meeting, the new CEO, Matthew Green, addressed the board. "We don't deserve forgiveness yet," he said plainly. "We have to earn it, and it's going to take years." No one disagreed. For once, Liberty Wings wasn't speaking in polished statements. They were speaking in hard, bitter truth. Maybe, just maybe, it was a beginning. But it would never erase what had been lost. The day of the White House ceremony, Marcus stood alone in a simple black suit, a small American flag pin on his lapel. Angela waited nearby, dressed sharply, a quiet smile on her face. A Marine in full dress blues opened the massive front doors. "Sergeant Reed," he said, saluting. Marcus returned it with crisp precision. Inside, the halls gleamed under grand chandeliers, portraits of past presidents watching silently from the walls. The world outside buzzed with reporters, flashing cameras, and headlines. But in here, it was strangely still. Personal. Real. The president, gray-haired, steady-eyed, met Marcus at the end of the long carpeted hallway. He shook Marcus's hand firmly. "You reminded us of our better angels, Sergeant," he said. Marcus just nodded, the weight of the moment settling around him like a warm, heavy coat. A few pictures were taken, official ones, but mostly it was just two men talking quietly about service, sacrifice, and what America was still trying to become. No speeches, no fanfare, just respect, plain and earned, the kind Marcus valued most. After the ceremony, Marcus and Angela stood outside the White House gates. The spring sun spilled gold across the manicured lawns. Reporters shouted questions from behind barriers. "Sergeant Reed, what's next for you? Are you running for office? Will you lead a national movement?" Marcus smiled, small and real. He leaned toward the nearest microphone. "I'm going home," he said simply, "and I'm going to keep building." The reporters blinked, thrown off by the quietness of it. Angela laughed softly under her breath. As they turned away, Marcus glanced back once at the White House, the flags waving in the breeze. Not in awe, not in anger, just understanding. He wasn't here to be saved. He wasn't here to be celebrated. He was here because dignity had a weight, and he had carried it, all the way through. That evening, Marcus sat on his balcony, legs stretched out, a cold soda sweating in his hand. The notebook sat, open on his lap. He wrote a new line under "for the next." "Build something they can't tear down." He smiled, closing the notebook gently. Below him, the city lights blinked awake one by one. A kid pedaled by on a bike, laughing. A woman walked her dog, humming a song under her breath. Life, unbroken, unbothered, still beautiful, still worth fighting. For Marcus leaned back, breathing deep into the night sky. He wasn't a headline anymore. He wasn't a symbol. He was just a man. And that, finally, was enough. "Hey, you're that soldier, right?" said the teenage cashier at the corner store, wide-eyed as Marcus placed a loaf of bread and a carton of milk on the counter. Marcus smiled politely. "Yeah, that's me." The kid fumbled with the register, flustered. "Man, my uncle served. He showed me your speech. Said it gave him chills." Marcus chuckled softly, digging a few bills from his wallet. "Tell him thank you for me," he said. The kid grinned wide as Marcus grabbed his bag and headed out into the late afternoon sun. Small things. They were starting to pile up now. Strangers nodding at him on the street, kids saluting him as he passed, handshakes from people who just wanted to say they noticed. Not fame, not noise, just visibility, respect, the kind that lived in the spaces between words. Later that day, Marcus sat with Angela on a bench at Lincoln Park, sipping cheap coffee out of a paper cup. The trees overhead were starting to bloom, little bursts of green pushing through stubborn winter branches. Spring was winning. Slowly, but surely. Angela nudged his arm with her elbow. "You ever think about what's next?" Marcus watched a father pushing his daughter on a swing, her laughter bright against the cool breeze. He thought for a long moment. "I'm not chasing anything," he said. "Not running from anything either." Angela smiled. "That's new for you." Marcus laughed once, low and easy. "Yeah, guess it is." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, letting the city move around them. Finally, Angela spoke again, softer now. "You know you could do more, right? If you wanted. Speak. Mentor. Build programs. People would listen to you." Marcus leaned forward, elbows on his knees, coffee balanced between his hands. "Maybe one day," he said. "Right now, I just want to live like the world we're fighting for already exists." Angela looked at him for a long beat. "You're already living it," she said. And somehow, that truth settled deeper than any medal ever could. Meanwhile, across the country, quiet ripples spread from Marcus's story. In a small town in Ohio, a public school held a Veterans Respect Week, students writing letters, hosting assemblies, inviting local heroes to share their stories. In Atlanta, a church raised money to build a new welcome center at the local VA hospital, in Marcus's honor, though he didn't even know it yet. In Los Angeles, a mural of Marcus went up on a side street, not towering and dramatic, but simple and beautiful. A soldier standing tall, a little boy on his shoulders, both smiling at the horizon. The inscription underneath said, "We carry the future on our shoulders." Marcus never asked for any of it. But somehow, it kept happening anyway. Proof that even quiet dignity could plant forests in places he would never walk. Back at his apartment, Marcus pulled out a battered shoebox from the back of his closet. Inside, medals, old photos, yellowing letters from his early days in basic training. He pulled out a photo, himself, barely 20, standing with 3 other young soldiers, arms slung over each other's shoulders, grinning like fools. 2 of those men were gone now, one to war, one to the slow, silent battle that followed coming home. Marcus traced a thumb over their faces. "I hope you see this," he whispered. He wasn't standing here just for himself. He was standing for them too. For everyone who never got to fight this fight. For everyone who deserved to be seen, even after they were gone. The next morning, Marcus met Angela at a community breakfast held by the local Veterans Outreach Group. The folding chairs were scuffed. The coffee was bad. The smiles were real. People clapped him on the back, thanked him, shook his hand. He didn't give a speech, didn't stand on a stage. He just moved from table to table talking to men and women with stories deeper than any camera could capture. A Vietnam vet named Earl slapped Marcus on the shoulder and said, "Took 'em long enough to see us, huh?" Marcus smiled wide, heart full. Better late than never, he said. Later that afternoon, walking home past the basketball courts, Marcus spotted a kid sitting alone on the bench, a teenager, maybe 15, twisting the laces of his sneakers. Nervously, Marcus recognized the look, lost, angry, trying not to show it. Without thinking, Marcus walked over and sat down beside him. The kid flinched a little but didn't move away. They sat in silence for a while. Finally, Marcus said, "Hard day?" The kid shrugged, not meeting his eyes. "Hard life," he muttered. Marcus nodded slowly. "Yeah, I get that." The kid glanced at him sideways. "You a cop or something?" Marcus smiled. "Soldier." The kid's eyes widened slightly. Marcus leaned back, looking up at the slow-rolling clouds overhead. "When I was your age," he said, voice low, "I thought the world didn't even know I existed. Thought it didn't care if I ever made it." The kid said nothing, but he was listening now. Marcus kept his voice soft. "But it does matter. You matter. Even when they don't say it loud enough for you to hear." The kid swallowed hard, blinking fast. Marcus clapped him gently on the shoulder before standing up. "Hang in there," he said, and he meant it. Every word. As he walked away, he heard the kid's voice, small but strong, call after him. "Thanks, man." Marcus smiled, deep and real. Not invisible anymore. Not alone. Neither was that kid. Neither was anyone who chose to stand tall, even when the world told them to sit down. "You sure about this?" Angela asked, standing next to Marcus at the steps of the new community center. The spring sun was high and bright, kids running around the lot with balloons, families gathering under the red and blue tents. Marcus adjusted, his tie, a little crooked like always, and nodded. "Yeah," he said. "Feels right." Angela smiled, handing him a small set of papers, the dedication speech, short, simple, just like him. The organizers called his name over the loudspeakers. "Sergeant Marcus Reed, everyone." Applause rolled across the parking lot like a gentle wave. Marcus stepped forward onto the small wooden stage, the mic squealing once before settling into silence. He stood there looking out, not at cameras, not at officials, but at people, real people, the ones who mattered. He cleared his throat. "I'm not going to talk long," he said, voice carrying just enough. Laughter rippled warmly through the crowd. Marcus smiled. "I just want to say, this isn't about me." He paused, letting the moment breathe. "This is about the kid who thinks nobody notices him. About the mom who works 3 jobs and still shows up at every game. About the soldier who comes home and wonders if he still belongs." He glanced over at Angela, who stood quietly in the shade, arms crossed, nodding. "You matter," Marcus said simply. "We see you. We are you. And today, this place, this is yours." He held up the dedication papers. "Welcome to the Sergeant Marcus Reed Community Center," he said, voice steady. Applause exploded, louder than before, filling the air like music. Marcus stepped back, heart pounding not from nerves, but from something deeper, belonging, real, earned belonging. Later, after the ribbon was cut and the speeches ended, Marcus wandered through the center, shaking hands, posing for pictures he never asked for. The center was beautiful. Bright murals on the walls, new computers in the library room, a gymnasium already filled with the thump of bouncing basketballs. On one wall, in simple black letters, was painted a quote, "Respect isn't given. It's lived." Sergeant Marcus Reed, he touched the wall lightly with his fingertips. It didn't feel like fame. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like foundation. Something solid. Something meant to last. Outside, as the crowds thinned and the sun dipped, low, Marcus sat on the front steps of the center, watching the kids run drills on the new courts. Angela sat down beside him, handing him a bottle of water. They drank quietly, letting the evening settle around them. Finally, Angela spoke. "You built something they can't tear down," she said, repeating the words he had written in his notebook. Marcus chuckled softly. "Took a while," he said. Angela bumped her shoulder lightly against his. "Worth it." Marcus nodded, feeling the truth of it deep in his bones. Worth every fight, worth every scar, worth every silent moment when he had wondered if it mattered. Because it did. Because it always had. As twilight bled into night, the first stars pricked the sky. Streetlights buzzed on, one by one, casting soft halos of gold over the sidewalks. Across the street, an old man in a wheelchair, a veteran, rolled up to the edge of the lot, saluting the center quietly before turning away. Marcus saw it. He would remember that simple salute more than any headline, any handshake, any ceremony, because it was real, because it was earned, not by shouting, not by demanding, but by standing. Standing tall. Weeks later, news outlets tried to chase Marcus again. They wanted exclusive interviews, magazine covers, TV specials. Marcus said no to all of it. He didn't need the world staring anymore. He needed the world building. So he stayed here, mentoring kids, speaking quietly at schools, helping veterans fill out housing forms and medical paperwork. One life at a time. One small, unshakable step at a time. And somehow, those steps echoed louder than any speech ever could. One evening, as he locked up the center, a teenager approached him. Tall, skinny, nervous. Marcus recognized him. The same kid from the park bench months ago. He wore a battered backpack now, his jeans too short at the ankles, but his shoulders were straighter, his eyes clearer. He held out a folded piece of paper, hand shaking, slightly. Marcus took it and unfolded it carefully. It was a college acceptance letter. The kid had gotten in. A grin tugged at Marcus's mouth. "Proud of you," he said, voice rough with emotion. The kid shrugged, fighting a smile. "You the one who told me I mattered, man," he said. "You started it." Marcus laughed once, low and full. "Nah," he said. "You finished it." They shook hands, strong, real. And then the kid jogged off into the deepening night, the letter clutched tight in his fist. Marcus stood there a while, staring after him, the sky wide and open overhead. As the stars blinked awake and the city pulsed around him, Marcus Reed smiled, not the tired smile of a man who had fought too long, but the bright, fierce smile of a man who knew he had stood tall. He had built something that could not be torn down, and he had made sure no one else would ever have to stand alone again, not invisible anymore, never again.